A significant part of what this project involves is deep inner work, and this episode invites self inquiry in the process of embodiment, coming out of dissociation and actually inhabiting our bodies so we can be present in ways that allow authenticity, helping us to live way beyond patriarchal sex. Today's guest is an experienced inner guide like myself, and it was a beautiful opportunity for us to speak for the first time. I often recommend her book, Descent and Rising, to the women learning with me. And so I hope you enjoy this episode with psychotherapist Carly Mountain. Welcome, everyone, to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, Beyond Patriarchal Sex, a place for both women and men to elevate ourselves, finding out what it takes to live beyond our conditioning and assumptions, not only for ourselves, but also for the coming generations. My name is Devashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these conversations. Thank you, Carly, for being the woman you are and having the foundation that you already have in this, deeply subterranean realm that this podcast and research is diving into. And I know that both of us as well, we have a really embodied inner foundation of female empowerment work in the sense that it's also friendly to men and welcoming of men. And I know that we both share that place that we're coming from. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you wanted to be here and part of this conversation. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, like you say, I feel like our work has a lot of resonance and crossover, so it's a delight to be here.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll let everyone know a little bit about your work. So Carly Mountain, you're a writer, a psychotherapist, an initiatory guide with 20 years experience. And Carly facilitates women and the people who love them to remember, reclaim, and reconnect with their sensual, emotional, embodied aliveness and instinctual knowing that is rooted in the earth.
Mm,
Very beautifully said.
thank you.
And where in the world are you? Maybe we can let people know about that as well.
Sure. So I am based in Sheffield, which is north in the UK. Yeah.
Yes. And we are going to be diving into embodiment and the importance of that and why it's important. And maybe if we start with the why and, what happens when a woman is feeling like her body doesn't belong to her? Because that's often the outcome, isn't it, of living under patriarchy, whether that's patterning of patriarchy within ourselves, in our intimate relationships, and just surrounded by that theme within the culture, where like it is so different to how it used to be. And what us Western world women are dealing with is, hard to compare to what a lot of women on the planet are going through. And yet it's still present for us. And in such an invisible way for a lot of people, which is why this research and podcast and book is part of all of this, to connect those dots and reveal that invisible elephant for the purpose of more harmony and more connection and understanding how to live beyond it really consciously.
Sorry, the word invisible there that you use is just so key because quite often we live it for a long time before we even realize that we're body doesn't belong to us. So yeah, I really love that. I just want to kind of go, yes, the word invisible.
Yes, yes. I mean, I grew up utterly immersed in it in every direction, it seemed, for a long time in the earlier part of my life. And it took a while to realize, oh, this is a huge, widespread cultural human phenomenon. It's not something that I'm isolated experiencing, but that's often where it begins, isn't it? Thinking that it's, in all the ways that it can show up. And I'll give an example because I had a tantric healing studio for 9 years as part of my background in Melbourne, in Australia. And with the deep one-on-one work that I did there with all the people that came, there was something very specific that I noticed, the kind of thing that only comes out when there's enough, I'll say, safety and depth in the environment and in the process to contact these really subtle places. And in that place that I'm referring to is when I was doing very light touch, sort of pressure point work, supporting her to feel into her positive pole of her heart, her breast and throat. And quite a few women spoke something so similar, which was, I'm not allowed to feel this. This is for my partner. I'm not allowed to feel the energy of my own breasts, for example, and they were having this dawning realization that they were coming into contact with this place of, my body doesn't belong to me. And it's like, before that moment that they spoke it out loud, they had never known that consciously. They'd never said that. They'd never known that they felt that.
Yeah.
And with the safety of the space, with the non-judging and the non-shaming response they would get from me, and at the same time, they would feel the frequency of, that's not how we need to be living, without me even saying a word, actually. And then it would open up into this, deep grief of realizing how long they'd been living in that patterning. And I imagine that you encounter similar things and, all sorts of things in the clients and women that you work with. So what's maybe some examples of a woman feeling like her body doesn't belong to her?
Yeah, I'm so moved by what you've just said. Because as you say, that dawning realization as it comes, and I'm really hearing how it came in this example you've just brought, through body work, through being witnessed and beheld in the body. And I think that is when we bump into the places that we have not been allowed to occupy or have had to dissociate from. And a lot of my work is about descending back down into the body, because I think one of the ways we cope with the culture of dominator patriarchy is to dissociate, to cope. And we don't always know we've done that. So yeah, I've had women in circles who, for example, will disclose sexual trauma that has never been spoken, and that might be for decades.
Yeah.
And if these things haven't been named, then we have to dissociate from a part of ourselves in order to cope and hold that. And so naming sexual trauma, also in therapy, when we are, feeling into or beginning to notice when dissociation happens. So oftentimes with clients, it will be things like a feeling coming up into the head, like the energy coming up, a little bit of lightheadedness. Or some people say, oh, my eyes are going funny. That's quite a common one that I hear. Some people will feel nausea. And some people will just feel that they can't move. And I can physically see that in people quite often. And I might say to them something like, I've just noticed that you've gone incredibly still and aren't really moving or breathing. Are you experiencing that? And again, a little bit like your invitation to the woman you were holding, the invitation to notice the body seems to allow a listening, a contact, a relationship that's not been possible. And then, like you say, comes with it, oh, a realization of, oh, wow, what's going on in me? Like what's happened? What do I
Yes.
feel? How do I get back into myself? How do I occupy my body, my emotions, the grief I feel about that? Eventually down the line, the rage I feel about that, and all the other things that then need to be processed in the re-inhabiting and reincarnating our
Yes.
physical body as our own. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's so profoundly sacred, that experience of, descending from being centered in one's mind into, oh, really actually meeting this more than physical body and meet self through that. It's such a profoundly sacred, felt sense
Yeah.
experience from it. And the rage that you mentioned, I know that for myself and the women that I've worked with, it's like, it's the realization of how long that really inhabiting oneself has not been happening, and all that occurred in that part of her timeline.
Yeah. And of course, the very difficult thing is when we are living in a dissociative state, a lot of the time, we can't protect ourselves as well as we might do if we are in our body and feeling our no's and our yeses very clearly. So, unfortunately, it tends to lead to more boundary violations and more very difficult things happening, not because it's that person's fault, but just because the nature of not being in our bodies mean that we cannot protect our bodies because we're not inhabiting them. So yeah, it tends to be that a lot of recurring events come from those key moments in our timelines as well. And so it really is an unraveling, and this is why the Inanna myth that I've worked with extensively really holds, I think, so much for people, because it's about taking the layers off. And as Inanna, the goddess that descends to the underworld, as she goes down into the underworld, she does take off layer after layer until she's stripped naked again, back down to her body, back down to her raw essence, and back down to herself, essentially. And I feel like that's the process we have to go to when we start to do this work of coming back, coming home.
Yes, yes. And it's so incredibly worthwhile to venture into that journey. I mean, the reality that continues without being willing to take that journey of descent into our bodies is, like, it ends up being passively upholding the paradigm that
Yeah.
is just unhealthy for everyone, and this podcast really makes a very clear point that patriarchy is a paradigm, not a person. And so both men and women are profoundly affected by it in different ways. And our willingness to work with ourselves and each other to dissolve it and live beyond it is the invitation here. And so this is a common question that I'm asking now on each guest episode, Carly, of what is your first impression of what patriarchal sex is, if you would define it in your words?
Good question. I think I would say that it is dissociative sexual connection.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I would just like to tap onto that in my own work, I really like to distinguish between patriarchy and dominator patriarchy, because I feel like, so the term dominator patriarchy, for anyone who doesn't know who's listening to this, was coined by Dr. Riane Eisler. And the reason I find it so helpful is that if we just associate patriarchy with the father and then make the whole father energy a negative, oppressive force, what we can have a tendency to do is to continue to disassociate from that father energy inside of us and the positive father energies on the outside of us.
Yes.
And what I've found important in my own journey and with the people I work with is foraging for a form of the masculine that is untangled from what we might associate with the blanket term of patriarchy.
Yes.
Because the blanket term of patriarchy for me, for a certain amount of time, led me to reject not only the violating dominator masculine on the outside of myself, but what I eventually found was that I'd also rejected the masculine on the inside of myself. And what that meant for me in real terms was that I couldn't be whole inside, and I couldn't recognize the masculine within me as a source within me, because
Yes. Yeah.
there was a part of it that was utterly rejected, and also that I was afraid of, and also that I was absolutely enraged by. And so reclaiming the masculine inside as a source within ourselves, whether you are male or female, as you've just said, because we all have the masculine and feminine within us, that and to begin to do that work of untangling what is a distortion of that creative masculine energy and what is actually its pure, supportive, essential essence. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I just kind of feel to name that, because I feel like there's a danger sometimes in exiling the masculine within and without. And that would be, that really, again, it just upholds the patriarchal dominator pattern then.
Right. Yeah, because it's demonizing and exiling a really important part of us and each other if it stays in a very reactive place. And like you've said, Carly, it's actually impossible, from my experience and how I see it, that we can live beyond, this unhelpful and over-controlled and restrictive patriarchal paradigm internally. We can't live beyond it without activating, for us as women, our healthy inner feminine yang, or developing our inner animus. It's not possible to live beyond it unless that is cultivated and developed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually felt very strongly just today, the impulse to reach out to Rianne. So it's very interesting that you're mentioning her right now.
Such an amazing elder and such a well of wisdom.
Isn't
I loved my conversation with her. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, she's so precious and wise. And yeah, I really look forward to speaking direct with her sometime, hopefully. And I am curious though, actually, with the word dominator, because I know that in the masculine energy community of men reconnecting with their masculine and on their journey of distinguishing, exactly as you've said, what is something to let go of or to dissolve, and what are the qualities and energies to align with and not do away with. I know that there's a reclamation of the domination capacity in a man and not being afraid of that. So I have a curiosity if there's reactivity around the dominator patriarchy term as well. But I deeply appreciate the nuanced understanding that definition that she's making is coming from. And it seems there's so much potential to be reactive about any kind of terminology, really, potentially. So what I encourage our listeners to do is actually connect with the real meaning and original meaning and definition of things, because there's like a hype social media culture and misunderstanding that is running around in the collective psyche. And then there's really measured, grounded, solid definitions and understandings that very accomplished teachers like Rianne have been forerunners to break down for everyone. And I feel like a lot of people have not tuned into that. They don't have that education and that maybe strong book reading in their history, and we can't get our definitions from social media, it's just it's there to create division in a lot of ways. And if there can be some togetherness in the original understandings of the meaning of these words, that could help things quite a bit.
Absolutely. And I really love that you're pulling on that point about reclaiming the domination energies inside of us and the submissive ones too. And I actually, in my new book, I go into this more. But yeah, I love playing with those energies myself. And I think there's, in my workshops, we play with the one in us that will dominate, that energy, that essence, and the one that also will submit, and what's the embodiment of that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you look at nature. I always go back to nature when I kind of
Me
get
too.
human kind of mush and brain mush. And I look at nature, and the predator in nature is obviously not a negative thing. Predatory energy, dominator energy, is part of nature. And so
Yeah.
in its absolute essence, it's an energy that, again, we need to work with as humans with the consciousness that we have. I think it's such fertile ground to explore and dare to feel those energies inside of ourselves and get to know the shadow of them and how they may play out without our consciousness, and bring them to consciousness so that we can take pleasure in them and relate and understand ourselves more deeply and go into that intimacy of relationship where we can power play and we can explore. And yeah, I've met for my own, with my upcoming book, I interviewed 60 people from all over the world about their relationship with sex and eroticism and pleasure. And one of the things that came up with the men that I interviewed was this dissociation from that energy inside themselves, and how they worked with that and have reclaimed that and untangled it from abuse. Because domination, I think, often gets equated with abuse. And in my experience, they are not the same thing at all. So thank you for drawing that point, because I do think it's an important one. And also for women to embody that power of those more dominant frequencies inside ourselves is so full of juice and so needed, as well as the desire to submit and let go and be carried and flow. And so much power in those things. There's so much juice here. It's
Yeah.
delightful and way beyond sex.
Way beyond patriarchal sex. Yes, and so the how to, I mean, we can go into that as well, obviously, but to live beyond patriarchal sex, what you're saying and how I see it also implies that we need our range. We need our full healthy range. Women are not just yin, soft, feminine, nurturing, and men get to stay in this controlling, dominating role like a static traditional relationship model that cannot have any flexibility or flow. Like that, to me, is a perfect storm to have abusive behaviors coming through, because it's like invoking such unconscious relationship templates in the collective human psyche, rather than being so vulnerable and authentic and willing to meet whatever is really there inside of us, instead of feeling like, well, I have to be this stoic character, or I have to be this completely, submissive follower who doesn't question anything because I don't want him to feel criticized. And, people playing with that at the moment. And I find that so interesting.
Perhaps that's one of the ways that we do move beyond patriarchal sex, is to really slough off, undress from the roles that have been assigned to us in that particular way, and expand out from that place and get curious who we are beyond those ideas. Because I think it becomes very performative. Sex becomes very performative when we are playing roles that we have seen from the outside and placed on top of ourselves from the outside in.
If you are a woman who wants to live beyond patriarchal sex, you're going to love the Tigress Path. It's primal feminine spirituality with deep somatic teachings and female embodiment practice. Currently, we have classes online and in person. There's the annual Tigress Bali retreat and more. So reach out on social media or go to thetigresspath.com for details.
Really, these energies in their most authentic, true, raw form emerge from inside out, not outside in. And again, this is something I say about very clearly in the book, because sexuality, the authentic, beyond patriarchal sex, for me, is sex that emerges from the inside out.
Absolutely.
Very clear about that. And I think the way that we are schooled to have sex in this culture is from the outside in. It's through education from porn, through imagery, through music videos, through these very narrow definitions of what males and females are and how we should behave with each other and within ourselves.
Yeah. And let's call that what it is, miseducation. Very distorted imagery coming into everyone's psyches. And, it gets us at a really deep level. People can think on the surface of their mind, well, I can watch that. It doesn't affect my behavior. But wow, if you really understand how psychology works, how the human brain and nervous system works, there is a lot of unconscious conforming to it a lot of the time, even for those that feel like they aren't totally enacting that out. Like if it's still readily streaming in to someone's awareness and their visual cortex, then it's having an impact,
Yes. And I don't want to shame the use of porn, because I have heard particularly women say, with platforms like Belisa, for example, like, I've never seen a woman's pleasure centered the way I did on that platform, for example, and things like that. Like, I really needed to see that. However, I have also heard many people say it was only when I started to stop looking at porn that I realized how much it had hijacked my erotic creative flow. And it's almost like a detox where those images eventually stopped coming in, and what was wanting to emerge from the inside could be reclaimed. But again, like, as you said at the very beginning, the invisible impact of these images and these ideas come into us at a visceral level. And I think this is the other thing about sex. It touches the pre-verbal. It touches the very, very primal, most visceral parts of us and our energy systems. Places that we can't just get to with our rational brain. And we don't always realize how that's being impacted, because it is so subconscious, it is so embodied. And I totally agree with you that to think these things don't have an impact is a huge mistake. So I'm not saying don't engage with pornography if you want to, but know that it will impact your system and be aware of that. I think that's a really key, so that we can make choice about then what we let into our energy system or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get that there's a very small section, small minority of what's available in porn that is more connected and more female centric, female pleasure centric. But it's just like the reality of how it all works, and the algorithm and what it sends people, and how the majority of it is actually really violent. And I don't know if you've seen, Carly, just really recently, there's a woman that, she's been working on it for years and years, but she's been such a force in exposing how the majority of what's on one of the biggest websites in the world, she's currently taking them out, which is an incredible, incredible outcome. Because a lot of it is human trafficking, a lot of it is non-consensual, a lot of it is outright violence and abuse. that is being normalized. So I feel like I'm at the point where I'm just really clearly saying that most of it is violence against women, like it
I
really is.
I don't disagree with you at all. Yeah, yeah. And I think I cannot remember the author's name now. She wrote a book called Women on Porn. I don't know if you've read it, but I highly recommend it because it's a really great exploration around pornography, um, using many, many interviews from women and their experiences. And I really benefited from reading that book. I enjoyed it a lot. Um, but yes, I don't
Oh, that's
disagree.
been helpful in this research, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And as you say, a lot of the people that I have spoken to and work with say that even in order to try and get to some pornography that is female-centered, you are going to see so many images beforehand that
Yeah.
will go in your system that
Yeah.
that itself is impactful. So it is a complete minefield, in my
Yeah.
opinion, and it's
Yeah.
something that I personally stay well clear of. But each
Yes. And you just mentioned this book that highlights women's, I imagine, quite vulnerable and raw experiences from it. And, I've worked with plenty of women that, whether they've encountered it directly themselves or, discovered that their boyfriend, when in their younger years, was taking it in, and just being exposed to it is so violating because it sends such a strong message that our bodies are not for us, that they're vessels for pleasure and procreation for for someone else, and we don't really get to have our own sacred experience. It's just not even part of the whole paradigm. And so being a young girl, like quite a few of the women I've worked with, like 12, 13 or younger, they're just bombarded with imagery and they think, my God, is that how it is in this world? And actually, a lot of the time, it unfortunately is, and I mean, erotic imagery has been around since humans have been around, I'm sure, and that can be done in such an artful, tasteful way. There is that, but the point underneath what we're saying is letting it come from within, letting our real inner experience have an environment and an intention and an understanding that it can be born from inside of us. There's not this thing that we need to be conforming to and taking our cues from externally. And what would happen if you had to let all of that go? What do you draw from? Where do you draw from inside? And the journey of embodiment reveals all of that, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think for me, one of the key distinctions between pornography and erotic material is that erotic material includes relationship. It includes a story of relating that leads to being sexual. And in doing that, it invokes our imagination, it invokes our emotionality, it invokes our connectivity to what the images that we then see in a very different way. So for me, erotic material will always, whether it's in some form, it will have a relational quality to it that is incredibly different than something that is pornographic, which for
Yeah,
me, porn essence is a complete disconnection from relationship. It is a dominator experience. But that's my personal take on it.
yeah,
That's what
that's a
I,
really important point. Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that because the missing relational togetherness, connectedness experience is what makes it part of what makes it feel so gross, right? And what can make erotic art, in contrast, be beautiful. So being willing to descend into our bodies out of dissociation.
mm.
Yeah. What would you love to share with everyone who's on the journey of reclaiming living beyond patriarchal sex, intimacy, and relating. So, in broad terms, what more would you like to share about your perspective of whether it's from the female lens or the male lens, just anywhere that feels alive for you in that?
Yeah, I think it is daring to go there, you know. I think there are so many ways that we can avoid descending and that we've been taught to avoid it. You know, the culture sells us a whole myriad of things on a day-to-day basis to keep
Mm.
us away from ourselves, essentially. And I
Yes.
feel what's so powerful about descent is that actually we don't need to buy anything. We don't need to do, we don't have to get anything from the outside to do it. It's an internal journey. And that's why it's so scary, I think, because, there are many journeys we can take outwards into the world that are challenging and scary, but ultimately, the people I work with and the way that I've lived my life, my most courageous journeys are the journeys that I've taken inwards into myself. And so to just encourage people to dare to go there, to dare to go there, because to not go there is in itself very, very painful. And I think that we can
Mm.
live in dissociative ways and feel like we're avoiding our pain. But actually, it takes so much energy to keep the things inside of us at bay that we're so afraid to touch. And
Mm.
once we touch them, it's like, oh, there I am. And I might be
Yeah.
feeling things, but actually there I am. And when I
Yeah.
can do that, then I can contact you. Then I can be in relationship with you. So then I feel less alone. And the thing
Yeah.
that really emerged through my first book, Descent and Rising, was the compassion that emerges from inside of us when we dare to descend back into ourselves and back into relational connection, primarily with self, but then how that changes our relationship with the world and each other. And
Hmm.
ultimately, though dissociation, I don't want to shame dissociation either. Dissociation is a survival strategy, it's a nervous system response. We need to be able to dissociate. It's not a completely negative thing. However, it becomes trauma when we stay in that state for long periods of time. And that is the really one of the most painful things that I've experienced in my life. So I'm incredibly passionate about coming back into the body, and sex happens in the body, right? If you want to work with your
Yeah.
sexuality, you are going to have to encounter your body. You cannot do it with your head alone. So, for anyone listening to this who might have been on the cusp of really going there, I would just encourage you to seek out some support and go there, because this work also is not meant to be done alone. Um, this work is meant to be done in relationship. A lot of what was hurt in relationship is healed through relationship. And there is just so much work that we can do together. Um,
Yes.
and there are many people out there doing this work now who hold beautifully, who can meet you in those places. So, um,
Yes.
yeah, to if you want to do sexuality work, finding someone who works with embodiment, who can behold you as you descend, who, like in the anonymous, will bang the drum for you as you go through, as you meet these places that have in the past been intolerable to meet. Um,
Mm.
and
Yes. Very
ultimately,
pleased.
yeah, what we find there is love, not the worst thing, actually, not the worst thing, but actually love in the end. Is what I find time and again with the people I sit with. They go to these very difficult places, and then underneath it all, they find their way back to the love inside themselves, and more love, therefore, in the world around them.
Yes, Carly, because we could say so many things, right? But living beyond patriarchal sex, in a nutshell, means making love, like making more love, because that's what it is all about in our bodies.
100%. Yeah, exactly. Making love. How do we make love to ourselves and each other and the world around us in the things we create, the things we nourish? Yeah.
Yes. And I think
And
it's good for women like us that are deep in our own embodiment journeys, and it never ends, right? As well as being guides for other people in their initiatory descent processes. That I think it's good for people to hear us be realistic. Like it's not always easy. Like there is challenge, there is discomfort. There can be a lot of discomfort in the descending process. But what's on the other side of that is just a completely different way of being that is so full of freedom and love and liberation. But like you said, if we don't make that choice, if we don't orientate towards that direction, the chronic discomfort of staying within the patterning, staying within the karmic cycle is excruciatingly painful, actually. So while it might be temporary on the embodiment journey, it's constant if we're not on the embodiment journey.
exactly, exactly. I recently held a really beautiful course with my dear friend Jacqueline Nguyen called Naked Power. And we had 20 women move through this journey. And the first day, there was this sense in the room of even, I mean, these are women. Well, there was a whole mixture of women who'd done a hell of a lot of work and some women who'd done a little bit less. It didn't really matter. There was a sense in the group of there's danger here. Where are we about
Yeah.
to? There was a resistance in the system because it's so countercultural to be in your body in a group of women who are really embodied. There was this signal that we've learned to have, we've been taught to have inside of this patriarchal dominated paradigm. And it was named and the difficult things began to be spoken. And over the 3 days, what we beheld was women moving from that place into connection, into voice, moving with the emotions that emerged and remembering together. And I saw women's bodies reminding other women's bodies how to move, how to let that erotic energy start to express from the inside out. And it was so beautiful. And where we went through the time together, where we started and where we ended was beyond words. And this is where and it was joyous and it was free and it was primal and something moved through every single woman uniquely. The flavors of the group were just so expansive. You know, the range you named earlier. It was about embodying the range of how these erotic energies move through our body spontaneously and teach us who we are, reveal to us who we are from the inside out. And it was utterly beautiful. And the reason I'm telling that story and that experience, I suppose, is to exactly elaborate what you've just said. There's a pain and a fear of going down. What will it be like? Will I lose myself? Will I become too much? Will I destroy my life? Will I XYZ? Will I harm people? Will I cope? And the answer within a supportive container was yes, unequivocally yes, through the whole entire group. And what was released and freed was awe-inspiring. And I don't use that. So it's just
Yeah.
an example of yes, it can be painful to descend. And on the other side of that, we free so much pleasure and power and aliveness. Oh,
So delicious, Ali.
it's so worth it. It really is worth doing if we can. If we can.
Yes. One of the things that really is highlighted for me when I hear you share all of that is however dense and, full on the patterning and programming of our ancestral karma and our generational trauma, which I see patriarchy as part of, um, actually our innate patterning, our organic natural state is far, far, far more powerful. And it's readily available, always there for us when we're ready to connect with it.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And that social vigilance of, oh, are we going here? Is it this okay? Is this safe? And then the checking with oneself and with each other. It's such an instinctual body experience. And
Mm.
I'm so familiar with it through the practice of Tigress that we've been teaching for years. And
Mm.
it's like this chance to reorganize the social collective field with each other, the relational field with each other as women, and be able to feel like week after week by coming regularly that this is so healthy, this is so possible, this is so beautiful and safe, and you know, it patterns us inside in a way that solo work doesn't fully touch on. There's that need for that relational space once again in the embodiment journey. Yeah.
Mm, there really is.
I'm personally here for the substance of this work and the research project, not for the likes. But if you want to see interesting and prominent speakers become part of this research, there are two things that you could do right now to help make that happen. First one is to follow the Tigress Path on Instagram or Spotify, and to leave a 5-star rating with a review if you can on Apple. These two things genuinely help so much to get this podcast and research on the radar of those who can help expand the conversation wider. And may we all be free from suffering. Yeah, okay. So one of the recommended reading books that I gave the women in a somatic embodiment training with me was your book, Descent and Rising. And
Mm.
there has been a request for you to speak on the journey of embodiment in the women's space, which she's familiar with me and with support of your book as well, but the integration into her life, especially in her partnership with the man that she's in relationship with. And
Mm.
she said she'd love to hear your thoughts on that journey of integration back into the daily life, being a woman who's so in the descending experience and getting comfortable with that within herself, getting familiar with that in her own body, and all the changes that that can mean on a relational level with a man.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And it's a question that I do get asked quite a lot. Um, Although not on podcasts. I think it's the first time anyone's ever asked me. So I'm so glad that you asked. I feel like there is a space in relationships, particularly male-female relationships, where when women are doing this work, there can be, it certainly has impact on the relationship. And how do we then navigate that? And it can be the end of some relationships, when women are doing this work and their male partners refuse to see or acknowledge it, it can be the end of some relationships. However, what I find with the vast majority of people that I work with is that it starts to have a ripple effect into the male partner's life that can be, if they can dare to go there with their partner, be incredibly nourishing for them too.
Yeah.
So I've been contacted by a number of men who have read my book and been given it by their partner, who've said that that's really helpful. And even if the male in your life doesn't want to read the whole book, there are a couple of key sections about the masculine which may be very, very helpful for him to read, which may appeal to him more inside of the book, because there's two key male archetypes well, there's three. There's the sky gods, there's a character called Enki, and there's a Dumuzi. And the getting to know those characters may well help a man understand a little bit more about how he can be someone to support his partner. But really, again, this work is so relational. So I just feel that naming to your partner what you're going through can be a really helpful thing to do. And with some of my clients, for example, I will say to them, you know, you can tell your partner, for example, sexuality. If we are making love with our partner and we're moving through descent, what often can happen when we are making love is that it will bring up a lot of emotion to the surface, and you may end up crying during or after the lovemaking. And for some men, that can be really alarming and make them retract and panic and think they've done something wrong or not know how to deal with it and take it as a bad, in inverted commas, thing. So one of the things I always encourage the women in those partnerships to do is to explain, you know, if I'm going to be in my freeness of my sexual energy with you, some of what comes might be deep emotional release. And that isn't a bad thing. That is testament to how much I trust you, how much we are in connection. And all I need you to do for me in that moment is hold me or just stay by me. And that's all I need you to do. I don't need you to fix me. And I think this is what the roles of the masculine, one thing inside of dominator patriarchy that I think that men have been very schooled to do is try to fix, to come in and fix and make it better and sort it out and understand it with the mind. And it's like, actually, I just need you to stay beside me. You can't fix this for me.
Yes.
Can you just be alongside me? And actually, for most people in descent, that's all they really need is a presence beside them, because actually, we can't fix it for anyone. As therapists, fix, as space holders, we can't fix. And also, I would even challenge that there isn't even anything to fix. What we actually need to do is be in loving presence. And if we can develop that within our relationship, then it will allow the lovemaking through all layers of the relationship to deepen, in my experience. So yeah, women become leaders inside of their relationships in this, and it can really allow men to become much more emotionally articulate creatures if they can really honor their partner and follow her lead in that way.
Yeah, it's such a rich theme to talk about this in particular, actually, isn't it? Because I'm feeling so much when you're sharing that. And I really feel so much compassion for the men who are partnered with women that are doing this really deep inner work, because they are going to see transformation pretty constantly. And they are, going to witness that and experience that and share that if they're willing, because what sex can be like on the other side of the pornographic performative version of it is something very emotive. And I'm aware as well, Carly, that there's a misunderstanding that I see going around of men basically being in fear that they're being feminized. And while there might be, agendas in the dominant culture that are doing that in some ways, I want to say that in this intimate, personal, relational space, this is truly evolution. And I can safely say, because I've contemplated this before, that every single man that I know who deeply gets what patriarchy actually is and what it means, and that it's not against him to recognize that. And in fact, it's empowering for him to free himself from it as well and learn properly how to relate with a woman in a woman's body, and let him go through the learning. Like, hey, you're allowed to learn. You're not meant to come in and know everything. Like, we're all in the journey together. Us as women, we don't need the men to kind of even pretend that they know it. Like, it's just not real. We already know it's not real. So how about we just be authentic together and discover what else is possible? And it is going to bring up a lot. It's going to bring up a lot, but it's so beautiful. It's so, so beautiful. And I think it's really where the mature, integrated masculine energy in a man really gets to be forged and where it really gets to thrive. And what I meant to say before was that those men that I know who are in that place of not being at odds at all with the title and the, direction of this podcast and research and book, they have come to that through loving a woman who has taken deep descent to learn how to live beyond the patriarchal paradigm within herself. And like you've highlighted, it takes that love and trust and safety for it to be a possibility, for it to be an actual embodied transformation for him as well.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And again, I think our coupleships shouldn't. One of the things that has been impacted in dominator patriarchy is the breakdown of community. And actually, couples need support. The relationship needs support. My husband and I have a spiritual teacher who's also a trained therapist, who's in her 80s, who's an incredibly wise woman, and we sit with her every month. And it's not because we're in crisis. It's because we want to tend our relationship and we want somebody with us to help us tend our relationship and support us in our relating so that we can explore and find our blind spots and have somebody eldering our relationship. And it's been utterly transformative to do that. And so I would just really encourage any couples who are listening to this, who may be struggling to find those new ways of relating, to just say, go find a space holder or a therapist to go to together. You don't have to be in crisis to go there. You can go to a therapist to be your beholder of your relationship, so that you bring it's a very modern way of bringing community into your relationship inside of these structures we live in, where the wider community that probably would have held couples more in places like Tamara. I don't know if you've seen the Village of Lovers film. It's absolutely beautiful. That there is community holding for relationship. And I think that it's really hard to do this work again as couples without that beholder, without someone to be there and help us spot our own patterns, because we all have them. As you said, it's a lifelong journey. Male, female, we are all figuring it out as we go, no matter how much work we've done on ourselves. So,
and Rihanna, you mentioned before, like her incredibly groundbreaking work that she brought through quite some time ago, what she's presenting, isn't it, as the alternative to the dominator culture and paradigm is relational, but partnership, right? And there is no true embodied partnership going on in a couple, in a male-female couple, if patriarchal sex is present. It's not a true partnership, because what's beyond that is space for the divine current, space for the intimacy and the authenticity and the vulnerability for, both surrendering together. And I'm going into the tantric level here of the embodied sexual experience.
yeah.
It is so unbelievably moving, so unbelievably transformational and utterly divine in your felt sense, and to have the relief that actually you're both letting go together to something way more powerful than both of you. It's such a false idea that a man in his humanness has to be in control all the time, because that is the dominator model. It's not allowing the full emergence of a woman's, full sexual potential and his capacity to relate with that. He never gets to learn that in the dominator model.
And what a huge loss, because he cannot be in his fullness, in his emergence, if he is holding himself in that very narrow space. Yeah.
100%.
It's a loss to us all.
Yes. Truly, truly. Carly, thank you so much for coming and meeting me in this conversation today. This has felt so great to explore this with you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed myself. So thank you so much for inviting me.
So, Carly, if our listeners feel like they really want to connect with you and your book and your work, what's happening right now in your services and how can they find you?
Sure. So the best way to contact me is through my website, which is carlymountain.com. And if you sign up to my mailing list, you get access to the Descent and Rising retreat, which was a series of conversations that I did with guests when I released my book, Descent and Rising, a couple of years ago. And they're totally free. You also get a free yoga in nidra on there, which is really beautiful for anyone who's descending to just rest their body. And you can also get me on Instagram as well. And all of the things that are happening with me are on there. So yeah, I would love to connect with people.
Thank you so much, Carly.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please do share it around on social media. And know that everyone is invited to be part of our research in the anonymous survey. Your contribution will help reveal the exact ways men and women can live beyond patriarchal sex and find greater harmony together. You can find the link to our survey and also details on the Tigress Path for Women via thetigresspath.com.